A lot of people are wondering if the recent election in the UK is a foreshadowing of what is to happen here in the United States. I know Donald Trump thinks so. He tweeted as such. So let's break it down. What exactly happened in the UK elections? Well, the Conservative Tory party handily defeated the Liberal Labour Party. And it wasn't a small defeat. It wasn't just kind of, it was a landslide. It was a horrible defeat. It was one of the worst that the Labour Party has experienced in decades. So let's rewind a little bit and kind of go over this. Now, if you remember the Brexit vote that happened before Donald Trump was elected. Now, the Brexit vote was sort of the beginning of the domino effect of nationalism and populism around the world. And people, when the Brits went to the polls and they voted for Brexit, afterwards, when it actually passed, people said, oh my gosh, they voted for racism and xenophobia and bigotry. And oh, they didn't really mean it. They didn't know what they were voting for. If they knew what they were voting for, they wouldn't have voted this way. It was a mistake. It was a mistake. Oh no, oh no. And bigotry and racism cannot win. So that narrative had been going on. Now, that sounds a lot like what's happened here in the United States. As soon as Donald Trump won, it was the same sort of thing. Oh, my gosh, bigotry and racism and sexism, especially sexism, that won. And this is horrible. And if people really knew what they were voting for, they wouldn't have done it. So this happened first in the UK. After that election, the Labour Party has consistently tried to block Brexit from happening. It still hasn't happened. These voters voted on it a while ago, and they're just not making any headway with it. So a lot of people now, then the voters went to the polls and they voted. This time they were voting for the political parties, and areas of the UK that had traditionally been Liberal Labour Party areas forever and ever and ever, this time voted for the Conservatives. They voted for the Tories. And it was shocking, absolutely shocking, especially since the media for the last several years has been saying the Tories are bigots, they're xenophobes, they're racists, and anybody who votes for them is one too. And you cannot go down that road, and Brexit's a mistake. And, they've had this media narrative going on for a really long time. And yet, what did the people do? The people went to the polls, and they, instead of voting for the Labour Party, which maybe they did last time, this time they voted for the Tories. It was a terrible defeat. Is that what's to come here in the United States? The way we'll know is let's look at the reasons why the Labour Party lost in such a really very embarrassing way. So The Guardian wrote this article, 5 Reasons Why Labour Lost the Election. Now let's go through this one by one, and we'll see how this parallels to what's happening in the United States. Because I do think if we're not careful with which candidate ends up with the nomination, then the GOP is going to win by a landslide. Donald Trump will not only win the Electoral College this coming time, but he'll actually win the popular vote as well. So let's pay attention. The first thing The Guardian says the Labour Party did wrong was they put up a terrible candidate. So Jeremy Corbyn was the man that was the leader of the Labour Party. It says here, Corbyn went into the campaign with the lowest net satisfaction ratings of any opposition leader since the late 1970s. Among older voters, Labour campaigners said his past support for the Irish Republican movement came up repeatedly on the doorsteps. In London, anti-Semitism and what people perceived as absence of an apology appeared to be a key issue. So you had 2 problems with Corbyn. The first one was people who were older said, I don't like his political past. He's got a bad past. He supported the wrong people. He was on the wrong side of things. We see that here in the United States with like Biden, who supported the Iraq War. And there's Kamala Harris, who's obviously not in the race anymore, but she was obviously, her past was pointed out very pointedly by Tulsi Gabbard. And so if you've got bad candidates, we saw this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. You're not going to win with a bad candidate. Another thing that's going on here with Jeremy Corbyn, however, is the social media, the social justice group that was really focused on that sort of stuff. They felt like he was a racist. They called him an anti-Semite, and that didn't do well with that crowd. So he had 2 crowds that were very much against him. Now we see that here in the U.S. Not only would you maybe put up a bad candidate like Joe Biden, but then you've got the social media crew going around calling people racist or saying, digging up people's past and saying this person's X, Y, and Z. So that can really harm an election. And we'll go a little bit deeper into that because there's a big connection here. I do think social media is actually ruining the party and ruining politics, and I'll explain a little bit better here. So secondly, the manifesto. They say that there was an incredible amount on offer in Labor's 2019 manifesto, It's Time for Real Change, from free care for the elderly, free university tuition fees, reducing the voting age to 16, and payouts for WASPy women. The party attempted to speak to every sector of society. So it said it wasn't that people didn't like the policies, people just thought there were too many of them. So we're seeing that as well in the Democratic Party. You've got the basics of the party of what should be there. And that is pretty well spelled out by Bernie Sanders. I think Bernie Sanders' platform in 2016 in particular was definitely one of, this is for the workers, this is for the people, this is where the Democratic Party should be. We want healthcare, we want living wages, we just want normalcy in our lives in order to be able to live with dignity and to be able to progress in society. Well, that platform, especially this election cycle, has expanded into areas that are fringe and, quite frankly, alienating of people. So now what we're hearing in the narratives are things like lowering the voting age to 16, getting rid of the Electoral College, reparations. We're seeing all kinds of narratives seep into the platform. They're hitting the debate stage. You've got these moderators that are asking the candidates about things like open borders. You've got all of these, and candidates are being asked about this by reporters. They're having to comment on these things. You're seeing I would say the social media crew sort of controlling the narratives a bit, rather than the party staying very focused on what the party is going to accomplish for the people. Instead, there's all of these fringe ideas that have seeped into the platform, and now all the candidates are having to answer for these sort of fringe ideas, and it's just creating chaos, quite frankly. It is just too much to put on a platform. Not everybody is in agreement with it. You've got a lot of people in the Democratic Party who are very hesitant about immigration, for example. And then you've got people like Julian Castro, who's essentially for open borders. So whether, and it doesn't really, whatever your stance on immigration might be, I know I've got my stances, but whatever those stances might be, the bottom line is it's still very divided of a topic inside the Democratic Party. You've got the working class people who are saying, they're taking our jobs, and others saying, no, they're not. You're just a xenophobe. You're a bigot. You're a racist. We're going to open up the borders. That's not a winning strategy. We cannot win like that. And then to say, oh, we're going to lower the voting age to 16. And a lot of people say, I don't even trust my 16-year-old with a car driving around. I don't even trust them to load the dishwasher on time, let alone with our political future. And then you've got ideas about reparations and payouts to people. And people are sitting there saying, I can't even feed my family. I can't even make sure my kid goes to college. I can't pay my healthcare bills. And now you want to give my tax dollars away to a group of people that I never was involved in their personally in slavery. I didn't have anything to do with it. That was 100 years ago. So you've got these ideas seeping into the platform that are not popular, and they're drowning out the universally popular ideas such as ending the costly, wasteful wars, everybody getting health care, and education being elevated, and people just and ensuring the rich don't continue to run off with our money. We're being robbed legally in this country. It's becoming a banana republic, and it's happening right in front of our faces. Those are the things that the majority of Americans are on board with. So rather than focusing on that, it's becoming way too large, way too much, and not popular ideas. Number 3 was Brexit strategy. Says here, what we're seeing in the Labour heartlands is people very aggrieved at the fact the party basically has taken a stance on Brexit the way they have. He said ignoring the wishes of 17.4 million voters was not a good recipe. So essentially they had become obstructionists in Congress, in their parliament. So you've had a bunch of people that said, you didn't know what you were really voting for. Had you really known, you wouldn't have done it. And, you're not, this was a racist decision and a xenophobic decision. You're not really racist or xenophobic. You didn't mean it. So they're basically telling the voters you were ignorant, you were stupid, and you were racist. At worst, you were racist. At best, you just didn't know what you were doing because you're ignorant. That's not a good strategy. And then to go into your parliament, or in our case, Congress, and say, so we're just not going to do what you told us to do because you just didn't know any better. That's not a good strategy. You vote these people in, you expect them to represent you in Congress or in parliament, and when they don't, then you vote them out. That's exactly what happened in the UK. They just said, okay, you're not going to do what we want. You're not going to actually listen to the will of the voters. Then you're out. You're losing your job. We're seeing this happen in Congress right now. A lot of obstructionism. They're just in there hell-bent to obstruct Donald Trump. We saw it before when Obama was in the Oval Office. The GOP was all hell-bent about obstructing him. We've got a bunch of obstructionists in Congress. Congress is the worst branch of government. They don't get anything done. I have such an issue with Congress. They are the most ineffective branch. They don't do anything. It's always the judges that have to make all the decisions, or the executive branch that signs executive orders, and the judges that have to rule on those executive orders. And Congress is, quite frankly, a shit show. And this is what's gone on also in the UK. When you do that, you lose. And that is, which, it's a real problem. So you can't be an obstructionist. They said, number 4, the collapse of the red wall. A regular line trotted out by opposition parties, particularly by the Conservatives and the Brexit Party during the election, was that Labour had taken its traditional working class support base for granted. Labour's offer failed to convince voters in old coal, steel, and manufacturing towns. Sound familiar? Yeah, because it is. What's going on right now in the Democratic Party is you have, once again, that social media crew turning around to those that are in the Rust Belt and saying, we don't need you anyway. You voted for a racist. You voted for a xenophobe. You voted for bigotry. We don't even need you. Guys, can't do that. You can't say, look, we don't need you. We'll win without you. No, you won't. You didn't win without them. You need them. And you say, well, yeah, but we got the popular vote. Well, that's because half the country doesn't even vote. But right now, half the country is a bit more motivated to vote because they're seeing what's going on and they're saying, I don't like any of this. So, Donald Trump in the 2020 election, if we don't fix these issues, Donald Trump very well could not only win the Electoral College, but the popular vote as well, because people will be motivated to show up just to stick it to Congress, just to stick it to the social media crew who's going around saying, oh, you guys are all a bunch of xenophobic bigots. That's not a winning strategy. You have to court the people who have, the working class. The working class people have been the backbone of the Democratic Party forever. That has been the actual backbone. Now, I know that they want to say it's other groups. They say, no, it's black women. That is not true. The backbone of the Democratic Party has been the working class, and that includes black women. That includes people of color. That includes a lot of people when you talk about working class. So turning your back on the working class, not listening to them when the working class says, look, we've got concerns about immigration. Rather than saying, yeah, you sound like a bigot, and what we're going to do is open the borders, say, you know what, let's talk about this. Let's really hear you out. Like Andrew Yang, he doesn't say, wow, you guys are a bunch of racists. Andrew Yang says, you know what, I hear you. I don't think it's the immigration. I think it's the automation. So let's talk about this. Let's really have a sit-down conversation. That is a winning strategy, not this social media uproar that ends up calling everybody names. That's not working at all. Lastly, they say here in The Guardian that the reason why the Labour Party lost so bad was because of the election strategy. They said that they just had a really bad election strategy. They didn't really focus their attention on everybody that they needed to. They instead, focused in on certain areas. It was very much like Hillary Clinton's election strategy in 2016. You cannot take any voters for granted at all. You've got to court all of them. And if you think, well, okay, as the Democrats, we definitely have the black vote, so we're good there. We're just going to go ahead and now focus in on the Rust Belt because we lost there last time. That's not a good strategy. You need to court everybody. You got to court everybody. So parallel to what is going on here, Now, I blame a lot on on social media. I do, because I think what's happened was you got all these all these politicians who, as social media has come to the forefront, has been more powerful and more people have been on it. You've got all these politicians that want to be relevant. They want to seem hip. They want to seem like they're really listening to the people. And they think social media is where the people really are, even though social media is actually where a small subset of people are. And it's a very like-minded people who are kind of their own group that do not represent the rest of America. That's who's really on social media, engaging on social media. So you've got all these politicians on social media, watching social media, paying attention to it, being bullied by social media. Social media goes and tries to ruin people's lives by digging up stuff from their past. And, it's a very scary place. And it's a very powerful place, even though it is not representative of the majority of the people. But it's only powerful because we allow it to be powerful. And we only allow it to be powerful because, and I know this as somebody who came out of establishment media, I came out of corporate media. In corporate media, they told us every day, oh, pay attention to Twitter, pay attention to Instagram and Facebook. You guys better get on that stuff because we want to seem relevant. So you've got all this media wanting to stay relevant. So they want to go to Twitter and see what's trending. They want to repeat tweets. They want to invite people on from social media. And you've got the politicians who then go in there and they're like, oh, I got to be on social media too. And it feeds itself. It's sort of this monster that rises up because they all feel like they need to remain relevant by turning to social media rather than knocking on our doors and really talking to us in the streets and out and about. And, they instead just go online thinking that's where everybody is. Well, social media has been able to control quite a bit when it comes to the platform of the Democratic Party. Once again, as I mentioned, all the fringe stuff they've been able to put in there. The narrative of calling somebody a racist or a bigot, digging up something from their past and saying this one thing they said or did, this is, now they're a sexist or a bigot or whatever, and so don't vote for them. That is very damaging to the party when that person truly does represent the values of the party. They maybe made a mistake one time in their past. We're seeing that with Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks. He maybe made some blog posts 10, 20 years ago or something that do not represent the work he's done. He's done a large amount of work in the progressive sphere, and yet that's being cast aside and, just tossed out the window by a group of people who want to read a blog post and say, so now this is the real you. The real you isn't all the work you've done all these years. The real you is that one time when you said that one thing. That's dangerous to the party. We saw it happen with Al Franken. He got shoved out. A lot of people are being shoved out. And it has nothing to do with what they actually stand for, what they represent. And then their social media is controlling the platform and controlling, the fringe stuff that goes in there. And social media controls, and because then social media turns around and says, well, all those people who voted for Trump are racist. It just all interconnects. The best thing that could happen is politicians, starting with Donald Trump, get off of Twitter. And they stop paying attention to it because it is ruining politics. And, we already have a problem in politics. We don't need social media to be the thing that ruins it. We already have money in politics that's ruining it. We are fighting a war. And the war is we are becoming a banana republic. We've got oligarchs who bought out our government. We've got media where the way we campaign is not door to door. It's not grassroots. It's on television. You got to be able to fundraise gobs and gobs of money in order to have a bunch of television ads on. And then you've got billionaires like Tom Steyer and Michael Bloomberg who can just buy their way into elections because they can afford to pay for all of these television commercials. This is the war we're fighting. We need to fight the money that is in politics, the money that has taken over our lives, the special interests, the big pharma. You've got big insurance, big pharma, military industrial complex, all of these things. And yet we're on social media talking about racism all the time. And then saying we need to, lower the voting age and get rid of the Electoral College and all of these fringe ideas. It's not going to win. The UK's election is a foreshadowing of what is to happen here in the United States if the party doesn't get it together. The party needs to focus in on these progressive candidates who do not fall into those traps. Instead, they continue to back the candidates that want to continue to talk about all these fringe ideas, and they're ignoring the candidates that are actually popular, like Bernie Sanders, like Tulsi Gabbard, like Andrew Yang. They're ignoring these candidates, and they're letting social media really run and ruin our lives. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I love to read your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for supporting the show by subscribing, watching the commercials, hitting the bell. You can also support the channel with the links down below. I do have, a lot of you have asked about West Bank videos. That footage is coming. I promise you, I'm going to be releasing it. That's now my priority. I also am still putting out the Saudi Arabia, our problem with our Saudi Arabia problem. I do have parts 2 and parts 3 coming your way this week as well. So all of that is coming. I haven't forgotten it. Nobody's gotten to me. Some people are like, oh, they got to her. She's not going to be able to put this stuff out. Yes, I am. Don't you worry. Thank you so much for watching. All of that good stuff is coming your way soon. Thank you again.